How you doing, guys? In my lifetime, I've had some jobs I absolutely could not stand, some that I could tolerate, some that I really liked. Rarely, and there were a few occasions where I had a sense of loyalty. Very few jobs in my life have actually felt that way. Where you were kind of included in the inner workings, you were treated somewhat human. You got to know the people behind the scenes. And you felt that sense of loyalty because they were loyal to you. They treated you pretty well. In every case, the inevitable has happened where the place was either taken over, bought out, but you find out within a few days that the atmosphere is totally different. At first, you may have that same sense of loyalty to the new owners, but you find out that although they may not be treating you bad, that sense of loyalty is not returned. You're now just another cog in the machinery. Depending on the situation, it can take a toll on you, because it may not be to your benefit to stick around anymore. You're starting to recognize that this company may be changing things and you are not in their agenda. You don't fit into their new scheme of things. So you kind of keep quiet, you keep a smile on your face, and you're putting up a front that you're still loyal to the company, but eventually what's going to happen is you're going to have to leave on your own or just be swept out the door. If your coworkers at first suspect that you may be leaving, they may say, no, stick around. Things will get better. Things will get better. They may not be seeing what you're seeing. Very few people can actually see through this. I mean, you look around, you step back, and the place is no longer the same. So you eventually move on. It's very rare to come across a job that you do have loyalty to, but on rare occasion it does happen. In 2010, I believe it was when the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses came out with the overlapping generation. This was the first hint that kind of turned my eyes around. I kind of had to step back. When I had people that were in the congregation, my congregation for decades, asking me to explain the overlapping generation. I caught myself a few times trying to explain it, but I really couldn't. The unfortunate thing, I thought that others in my congregation were seeing through what I was starting to see through. To this day, I'll never find out. I'll never know if they did or didn't. I stuck around for a short time. It was about 2011. I started backing off and fading. I was looking at this place totally different than I had several years earlier. It was shortly after that I discovered the child abuse problem. And as the more research I did, I discovered that this organization was not what I thought. The sense of loyalty I had for it a few years earlier was no longer there. The unfortunate thing is how many of the JWs in my congregation tried to lure me back. I was getting phone calls, texts, people at my door. Oh, things are, they wanted to know what the problem was, but at this point in time, I knew better. Keep it to myself. Let's not rock the boat. I was always under the impression that all I had to do was walk away. Apparently, they didn't see it that way. Well, it eventually happened. I couldn't fake it anymore. And in about 2016, I started revealing what I knew about the organization. Obviously, they did try to dumb me down, but by doing so, I'd already put a bullseye on me. They already saw me as a mark, somebody that had to be watched. So, I'm out. How I benefited was not having any family or really any friends in the organization, so all I did was move on. Most Jehovah's Witnesses have family and friends in the organization, and for the most part, that's all they have. And there are many PIMOs in that have seen the same thing I have. They know the organization is a lie, but they largely stay in because of their families. They little by little try to wake their families up, but the unfortunate thing is, not everybody is going to see what you see. Not everybody wakes up at the same time. You may have been more open to information that you heard and recognized that this organization was not infallible. When I started recognizing it myself, I had no doubts about it. I just did further research to find out basically to confirm what I knew. Once I knew that, there was no turning back. There was no way I could view this organization the way I had done at one time. I always wondered if anybody inside my congregation was seeing what I was seeing. I suspected a few were, but again, I could never confirm it. If you're a PIMO, if you're physically in and mentally out, and are staying in because of family members, there's going to come a time where you're not going to be able to wake them up. Nothing you can do is going to wake them up. They need to wake up on their own, much like you did. And unfortunately, I've known many JWs that were in there for so many decades that they were totally blind to the elephant in the room. They're not going to see it. And unfortunately, there's nothing you can do that's going to wake them up. And eventually, it's going to take its toll on you the longer you stick around. Much like that job that at one time you may have had a loyalty to. The atmosphere changed, and the longer you stayed, the more of a toll it took on you. To the point where you were in a mood, feeling god-awful outside of the workplace. That job eventually took its toll on your own time. You had to leave it. And the Kingdom Hall is no different. You're going to find yourself wearing yourself down. And unfortunately, if your family is not waking up and if you're largely sticking around because of your family, eventually you're going to have to cut them loose. I know for the most part it hurts to have to cut your family off. But this is where self-preservation comes in. Are you willing to chip away at your own life to try and wake people up that are not going to wake up? They may eventually wake up. But at this point in time, if they're not waking up, there's nothing you can do that's going to wake them up. For some reason, they still look at this organization, even with all this evidence out there, they still look at this organization as God's organization on earth, when in all honesty, I think we all recognize right now that God does not have an organization on earth. Watchtower is no different than any other religion on the planet. They're into it for the money. They lie to their rank and file. And it is a complete lie. You know it. I know it. Many in the organization know it. But eventually it's going to be time to get out. It's unfortunate you have to cut people off. I mean, on a rare occasion, you have a soft spot for somebody. And they need your financial or moral support, so you start assisting them. The problem is, no matter how much help you give them, their situation never seems to get any better. And although you may hate to cut them off, and I've been through this several times in my life, actually quite recently, within the last year, I've had to cut somebody off, that no matter what you did, they weren't seeing what they had to do. And the unfortunate thing about assisting somebody who's down and out, I'm not saying it happens to everybody. Some people do take advantage of the assistance and they get up and they move on. Others, they stay in that same position. And the more help you get, you're basically just enabling them to stay in that situation. And you give it some thought and you have no choice but to cut them off. And when you do, they either sink or swim. In some cases, I've actually seen people improve their situation when I've backed that assistance off. But either way, there comes to a point where you have to back away. You can't save the world. And many times, people have to see their own dilemma before they improve their own situation. And the prisoners of Watchtower are no different. You woke up doesn't mean someone else is going to wake up. When I started waking up, it was a gradual process. 2010 is when it started. 2012, oh yeah, I was done. I had already started fading in 2011 with really no intentions of going back. And by 2016, I was free of it. But it's just something for you PIMOs to think about. Eventually, you're going to have to cut ties. Eventually, for your own survival, you're going to have to cut loose and get out of that organization, because little by little, it's going to be chipping away at you. And it's going to start doing you harm, whether it be mentally, emotionally, or physically. It's going to do you harm. You have to get away. Anyways, guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts. and I will talk to you in a few days. You guys have a good day.